this is Chandler Holloway, and today I'll be showing off some exciting new custom files for a few of my favorite Casio instruments, specifically the CT-X700, the CT-X800, and the CDP-S350. These specially made registration banks were created using my soon-to-be-released software utility called RBK Mixer. This program was developed to address one of the most common complaints from owners of these particular Casio models, which is the lack of a mixer menu to adjust the volume balance of the split and layered tones. I've decided to release these custom utility banks while RBK Mixer is still in development as a sort of preview of all the cool new functionality made possible with advanced registration editing. You can find a download link as well as written instructions and tutorial videos on how to import these bank files to your keyboard in the description down below. For this first video, we'll be looking at the two MIDI control banks. Just to provide a bit of background here, when you use your keyboard as a USB MIDI controller to trigger external sound sources, like software instruments in a digital audio workstation or mobile app, you can disable control of the internal sounds by turning local control off in the MIDI menu. Although it may seem like your key presses aren't doing anything, the keyboard is still sending out MIDI note messages, and MIDI note messages received from external sources will still trigger the internal sounds. However, while local control is useful in a lot of MIDI applications, it is an all-or-nothing solution, as it turns off everything you can normally trigger from the onboard controls, including secondary functions like rhythms and accompaniment. On more advanced models like the CT-X700, an easy way to address this issue is to use the built-in mixer menu to mute any internal sounds that you don't want to hear. So, for example, if I wanted to use the internal piano sound layered with a string sound from my Moog iPad app, I would enable layer mode, but set the volume of the layered tone all the way down to 0. Even if I don't hear it, the layer tone is still technically enabled, so the CTX will continue sending out MIDI notes on the layer tones MIDI channel. Unfortunately, the entry-level CTX models and the CDP-S350 do not have a mixer menu, but these custom-made RBK files circumvent this limitation by muting certain layers whenever a specific registration slot is selected. This graphic shows the contents of both MIDI control registration banks, so just import the appropriate RBK file and recall whichever slot matches your MIDI control needs. I'm going to put together a triple layered pad sound with warm pad assigned to upper 1, sweep pad on the lower split, and the layer tone muted so I can control this brassy pad patch on my microKORG synth. That means I'll want to use slot 2 in MIDI control bank 1, so after I've imported that bank file, I'll just recall that slot and then play a few notes to make sure I have the right settings. As expected, I'm only hearing the piano on upper 1 and the bass on the lower split, even though I still have all 3 tones enabled, as you can see on the display. At this point, you can now swap out these default tones for whatever tones you actually want to use in your performance. You can also take this opportunity to configure other parameters for your new registration, like picking out a rhythm style and tempo, specific reverb and chorus effects, an arpeggiator type, and so on. Once you've got everything dialed in, you can save this modified registration to store these settings for later. But I would recommend choosing a different bank so that you don't overwrite any of the utility registrations in case you need to use them again. Before I start demonstrating this massive triple layer pad sound, I'm going to connect the output of the microKORG into the audio input on the back panel of my CT-X700. This very useful 1/8" jack will overlay the audio from your external sound source on top of the keyboard's internal tones, providing a convenient way to combine all of your sounds together without needing to use an external mixer. Now, you might have looked at this chart earlier and wondered why you would ever want to use a registration like this one in the second bank, where all 3 of the tones are muted. Well, even though you've muted all the keyboard tones, the rhythm and accompaniment voices are still fully usable. This lets you configure your keyboard as a multi-channel USB MIDI controller with the added bonus of a built-in drum machine or accompaniment generator to play along with. In this example, I switched over to the Moog app again so I can control one of its bass sounds using the keys while playing on top of this built-in trance rhythm. There are some other important details to keep in mind when using these MIDI control banks, but for now I think we've already covered plenty for one video. However, when you follow the download link in the description down below, you can check out the expanded write-up I included alongside the files over on Casio Music Forums.